There is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow podcaster. True nobility is being superior to your previous episodes. Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns, where today we're going to be looking at Kingsman, The Secret Service, in anticipation of Kingsman, The Golden Circle. The first film went down very well with critics and audiences alike when it was first released a few years ago, but will Calvin, Alan and Sol think of it as dope? Well, keep listening to find out. This podcast contains spoilers for Kingsman, The Secret Service. Enjoy! Hello, today we're going to be talking about Kingsman, The Secret Service. I'm Calvin, codename Sol, and with me are Alan, codename Calvin.
Hello.
And Sol, codename Alan.
It's going to get very confusing.
It's me, Sol, codename Alan, from Barnsley. How do you do? I'm a perfect gentleman.
Yes, that's a little joke about the code names that are in Kingsman.
I might be way off base here, but I'm gonna take a prediction at your two opinions.
Okay.
I think Calvin absolutely fucking loves it. Thinks it's like just an amazing, hilarious throwback to his favourite films. Another triumph for Matthew Vaughn, and I think Alan thinks it's a load of puerile, shallow, insipid nonsense with a troubling political agenda that he's going to use to prop up his opinions. Is that
you're right with me.
No, not particularly with me, I'm afraid.
No? Oh, okay.
No, not particularly. I mean,
If anything, it's a political agenda that he'll agree with, surely.
yeah, we'll come into that. Well, are we getting into it? How are we going to do this? Sort of.
Well,
overview first.
Yeah. Should we talk about how we came to it? Did any of us see? Obviously, we're looking at it now because the sequel is due to be released very soon. Kingsman: The Golden Circle. But the original film, the first film rather, was released in 2014, and it was based on a comic,
James
I
Bond.
believe. Well, no, it was.
What?
It was,
never heard of it. What?
It was based on a comic by Mark Millar. Is it Millar or Miller?
I don't know if Millar is a particularly unusual pronunciation of how it's spelled.
It's got an A. If it was Miller, it would have an E.
It probably is Millar now.
I don't know.
I've never heard it said. It amuses me.
If listeners know, send us a video or audio file, rather, of you saying the name. Anyway, yes, it was based on a... I don't want to say comic, I believe the term is graphic novel.
It's the same fucking thing.
Come on. Were either of you aware of that before the film was released? Did either of you see the film when it was released first?
I was aware that they were basically trying to repeat Kick-Ass with a new graphic novel, the same team of people, and it was doing a James Bond thing rather than a superhero thing, but that's kind of the extent of my knowledge, really. I remember when it came out, I saw all the trailers. I was never that bothered about seeing it, really. I just thought, like, whatever, and just never really got round to it.
I saw it at the cinema.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I saw it at the cinema.
That's unlike you.
It was one of those things that it came out and like I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't like knew where it came from or anything. But then I saw a trailer for it or like heard good things about it. So I was like, I'll go see that. It was just when we were going to the cinema, it was like, what do you want to see? Okay, that's on. It wasn't like a real destination film, but it was just like, that'll be all right.
That's exactly how I came to it. I think I only saw it because my sister was quite keen to see it, so we went together and. Yeah, I wasn't hyped for it. I was kind of like, okay, well...
That does surprise me. It's
because of its Bond connections.
Yeah, I mean, there are Bond connections, but there are so many films out there, like any spy film. Like, they did it with, what was that Man from U.N.C.L.E. film a couple of years ago with Henry Cavill in it? Like...
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, but the Man from U.N.C.L.E. is based on the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, I get that.
But this is very much of self-conscious, not quite a... Well, actually, basically, this is my first point that I want to raise. it's very difficult to tell exactly where this film is pitched. It's very kind of self-consciously ridiculous at times. It's knowingly parodying Bond is the obvious one, but also other things. But it never quite goes to spoof territory. It still maintains a sincerity about it. It sort of works within its own rules. And it's...
I think it does go into spoof territory, but it's
quite
just
near the end.
A bit of a tonal mess.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying. I wasn't entirely sure how the whole thing was pitched. And it's part of... 1 minute it's light and fun, 1 minute it's hyper violent, 1 minute it's, this kind of nod and a wink, 1 minute it's a legitimate attempt to revitalise a sort of old genre that's been left behind. I never really knew what it was meant to be. For the most part.
Even within its own story as well, you've got this kind of very old-fashioned setup with the gentleman spy, and then this kind of the young, scally urban lad who gets drawn into it. So even within the film itself, they're clashing the old-fashioned and the new, but then they're also doing that by using these, now fairly old-fashioned sort of James Bond type things, but then modernising them. And I'm not sure it quite all worked, and there's definitely a couple of elements that really jump out as not working. But generally speaking, I enjoyed it, and it's very watchable. As a general feeling, then, how did you guys take it? Did you enjoy it?
I loved it for all the reasons that Sol outlined. I think it's a really nice throwback to if they were still making the kind of Roger Moore, James Bond type adventures today, it probably wouldn't look too dissimilar to this. I obviously like all the James Bond. It doesn't really spoof it so much as it lovingly homages in places and comments on it. And I really enjoy it. I think it's a great film.
It is a full-blown comedy, though. I suppose it's more akin to something like Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, which aren't spoofs so much as they're comedies that happen to be set within the same
That's a really good
genre.
Yeah, I think this is to James Bond what probably Shaun of the Dead is to, I don't know, the George A. Romero?
Yeah.
Romero?
Although
is that a self-reference to your earlier joke?
No, that was a genuine, I just can't pronounce anything today. God.
But I do feel like that might sound like we're giving it too much praise, because I don't think it's that good.
You don't think it's as good as the James Bond films that you don't like?
No, it's not as good as Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, right. You're saying that as a zombie fan, like knowing the little gags.
I think Shaun of the Dead, not to get ahead of our Shaun of the Dead episode, but I think Shaun of the Dead is about as perfectly written a screenplay as you'll find. Masterfully directed. Brilliantly crafted film, just on pretty much every regard. Kingsman is a fucking mess, frankly. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I did like the film, but it's not without some serious flaws.
I think it is one of those films that is enjoyable enough that you can kind of look over the cracks.
Yeah,
whereas
exactly.
if you get the film, which perhaps is what happened with Kick-Ass with me, if you just don't quite like the film enough, you start to pick up all those cracks and go, hey, look at this. Yeah. Whereas in this one, you go, it's okay, it's...
Yeah, and when I was watching the film, I was seeing all these cracks and thinking, like, I was very aware that I could really go either way with it, to be honest, and there were things that were bugging me that could really wind me up, and I wouldn't enjoy it if I focused on them. But for the most part, it's a really solid, entertaining bit of fun. But you do kind of have to... Well, I guess it's the cliche, isn't it? You have to kind of turn your brain off and check your brain in at the door and all that.
Maybe. I don't know. Should we get into it and go through it?
My first note, actually, is... I had no idea going in that Samuel L. Jackson was into it.
Oh, really?
Don't quite know how that had passed me by, so that was a nice surprise.
He's a huge reason of why I love this. And apparently he talks in interviews about he took the part because he was like, he always wanted to play a Bond villain, but he's the kind of actor that he is. He's probably never actually going to be in a Bond film, given the kind of people that they go for now. So he was like, well, this is my only opportunity, really. And I think he plays it as a Bond villain, and I think he's kind of brilliant. He's comedic. He's more comedic than a Bond villain would ever normally be. Like, he's very squeamish about seeing violence and blood and all that kind of stuff. Which
that's something that wound me up, because they set that up, and the second you see it, like, it's the second they set that up, you go, right, that's coming back in the final act as a gag where someone stabs him or he sees someone, that's going to pay off as a joke. But I thought it was going to come back more than once at the end.
It does.
It's like, is it?
Yeah,
When's it alluded to again?
It's like when I'm going ahead again here, but when he shoots Colin Firth in the head, and he
oh yeah,
sort of like, people don't recognize
it comes back a few times, and then when he actually dies,
when he sees the violence inflicted on himself, he vomits
after he
and that's
dies.
That's the payoff.
Yeah. They do give him just enough sort of character. He's like a very nouveau riche, and that clashes with this kind of old gentleman sort of style that he's part of their like lifestyle now. And he does this weird lisp thing. Is obviously just something he wanted to try. But it just gives it it does give him a lot of character.
Yeah. But we've jumped forward a bit here because he's not introduced. We have a prequel, a prelude rather. In the opening, we basically see a raid in the Middle East where agents are being, we assume, trained at this point, and one of them dies under Colin Firth's tenure, and he therefore fails the application process to become a Kingsman. And Colin Firth feels guilty about this, so he goes to the guy's widow and tries to give her this little, what is it, a pin? So
get out of jail free card.
Basically, yeah. It's basically a little medal, and it has a number on it, and he's like, if ever you're in trouble, call this. She doesn't want to know anything about it, so he gives it to the young lad, who must be about 2 years old or whatever.
Is that a one-use only deal?
It seems to be, yeah. And I don't know if it's later used. The main character Eggsy, the young boy who gets it, uses it to get out of jail free, quite literally. I wonder if it's sort of like, if you wanted to have someone killed, could you call that number and be like...
Well, that's it. I didn't really like that, because it just... It seemed kind of absurd that Eggsy would make it to that point in his life where he was that willing to, steal a police car, among other things. Not a police car, sorry. Steal someone else's car and then go on a police chase in reverse and what have you. And he's never tried to use that number before. It just seemed a bit...
Because we are introduced to Eggsy, and his mum apparently falls on hard times, and she's in an abusive three-way relationship, an early scene implies. And he's a chav, I want to say. Is that fair?
Yeah. He is the stereotypical chav character. Or rather, he comes from a cartoonish depiction of
one of my notes here was the depiction of the working classes in this film is exactly how I think working class people are in Calvin's head. Like this.
This is one of
this
the
is
things
what Calvin
that
imagines London is like in those inner city areas.
It isn't.
This is one of the things that sort of bothered me about the film. It's very much a film that tries to have its cake and eat it at the same time. It reminded me of Shallow Hal, if you've ever seen that, where the whole film is this idea that Jack Black has a spell put on him that means he can only see people's inner beauty, and he ends up falling in love with a morbidly obese woman, but he sees her as the ridiculously thin Gwyneth Paltrow, rather than Gwyneth Paltrow in a fat suit. But along the way, the film's just 90 minutes of fat jokes, so that completely undermines its message, not to mention that their depiction of inner beauty is as skinny, thin people who are traditionally beautiful, and therefore they are reaffirming the idea of traditional beauty. Nothing about the film really works despite its best intentions, and there's a lot of that same thing in Kingsman, where they're clearly trying to say something about, the Eggsy's got pure. He's pure of heart and he rises above it, but the rest of the working class in this film are ludicrously cartoonishly portrayed.
His mates are all right, and we are supposed to like his mum. She makes bad decisions, but Certainly when they start out in the prequel, they seem quite middle class, and it seems to be that the death of the father did that to his mum, and she sort of went off the rails
that's
a bit.
exactly. She's not real working class. They're demonizing the working class by making them into this hell that the mother falls into.
The working class is what happens to middle class people if you go off the rails.
Well, they demonize the upper class later on in the film. My God, I mean
they
that's what
demonize.
they trying to do everything, aren't they?
They demonize environmentalists, but
middle class is safe. We're all safe, chaps. Anyway, but I think this class thing is very much it's an overt theme in the film, and I think it's best exemplified by the prejudice, I suppose, that Colin Firth's character receives when he wants to try and recruit Eggsy into the Kingsman. Michael Caine's the head of this organisation, and he's really unhappy about it. He's very finger-waggy, no, he's not one of us, and all this kind of stuff. It seems like a very posh boys' club, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know that scene in the police station? I'm just thinking about what didn't work for me there. What I needed there, from a writing point of view, to buy that he would use that amulet or whatever with the phone number on it, is like, I just needed like a prompt. If you're meant to buy that he's never tried using this thing before, or maybe he has and it's never worked or something, like he needs to see a symbol on the wall or something.
Or even if the policeman had gone, "Oh, you're going to go to jail unless you've got a very powerful friend who can do you a favour," as a kind of throwaway jokey line, and then he's like, "Oh, hang on, no." Something like that.
Yeah, I agree, and for such a crucial, because it's that moment that gets Eggsy and Colin Firth's character together, and it's a big moment. But in the middle of all this, we have a character played by Mark Hamill. Who I
also had no idea was.
Who apparently, from my very basic research of the graphic novel, this character in the graphic novel is called Professor Mark Hamill, and they cast Mark Hamill in the role, but for some reason changed the name. Like, I don't know. I thought it would have been
too self-conscious if they actually call him.
I thought it would have been funny, but he's playing a character. He's doing an accent. I guess he was over in England when they filmed this, probably doing Star Wars or something. Anyway, we quickly find out that the Professor Mark Hamill has been kidnapped by Samuel L. Jackson and his henchwoman Gazelle, who is a young, attractive lady with swords for lower legs, which is very much a classic sort of Bond villain type.
It's quite a cool like henchman. Something weird about them, but they use it as a weapon. I love it.
She's one of my favourite things in this film, and how she like slices. I mean, some of the violence is ridiculous. In that particular scene, she slices one of the Kingsmen like down the Sol's favourite, Jack Davenport. She slices him right down the middle, and he like flops apart like paper.
Is he the guy in Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yes.
You guys hate.
So at the beginning,
I liked him. Yeah, he was good.
He turns up at the beginning. I'm like, oh Christ, Jack Davenport's in it, and then they kill him off in the next scene. It's like, all right.
Why do you hate Jack Davenport? I quite enjoyed him in this. I thought he was he was just the right kind of bargain bin Benedict Cumberbatch kind of guy. Do you not think he fit the part?
I don't know why you like him.
It would have been better if they got like a big star who would be killed in the first couple of minutes, but I liked it. I thought he was good.
No, it makes perfect sense to him, because it's like, who could we get that would have been a really shit Bond? Jack Davenport. But it's like just close enough to have been contemplated for Bond, but would have been shit.
Jack
exactly. Davenport.
It was good. I liked it. I thought it worked. And again, like I didn't expect him to die, and like he was introduced, and I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be some character setting up, a load of stuff in the background throughout, and then he's killed off in like the first 2 minutes or so, and I thought it worked quite nicely.
I really love there's some little details in that scene that I absolutely love. The main one is the whiskey that is sort of passed around from character to character, because they offer Mark Hamill's character a whiskey, and one of the guys goes away and gets it, and then he brings it back, and through the fight sequence, Jack Davenport manages to get hold of it, and then later on Gazelle manages to get hold of it when she's fighting him, and then she eventually passes it to Samuel Jackson. I thought that was a really nice little directorial flourish.
It gives it a sort of sense of playfulness to offset this horrific violence.
I bring up the Jack Davenport character specifically because that is his death is what brings about the main event of the story, which is to recruit another Kingsman. Because I guess it's like the double O's where you only go up to 9, and they're only like
So they take the name. They take the code name of Lancelot.
Yes.
Wait,
Yeah.
00s only go to 9.
Well, that we know of.
Yeah,
Officially.
otherwise then you're 010.
Well, no. Do you think it goes 009.1, 009.2?
Probably
or
not.
Just 010.
In Thunderball, when they recruit all the when they call in all the 00s, there's only 9 chairs there. And at least one of them is a woman. Like, I'm probably going to rant a bit later on about the lack of good female characters in this film, but when they all the Kingsmen hologram in to toast to the deceased Lancelot, and they're all men. I thought that was quite...
They're all white men of about 37 years old.
Yeah, I wondered if they were going to comment on that at some point.
Well, I feel
they
like that was...
Well, then...
I feel like that was fittingly authentic for the Kingsman society, but the film never seems to... I mean, it's not devoid of, it certainly doesn't hold the Kingsmen up as these wonderful gods, because obviously Michael Caine is revealed to be as good as a villain at the end of the film.
But the problem with it really is, like, Michael Caine's getting sniffy about this working class oik trying to get in, but then there's a girl trying to get in, and no one even mentions it. It's like, this is an old boys like thing, like. And there's no black people allowed to apply or anything like that. So I just thought, if you were going to make a point of that, then make a point of it. Just like at least mention, even if it's like a casual kind of throwaway line or something.
I think this film's very politically and sociologically, I think it's very confused, to be honest. I think it's quite schizophrenic in that it clearly has a lot of... right-wing values in its skeletal structure, but then it's kind of trying to say some things that aren't compatible with that. It's trying to subvert some ideas, and you never quite know what the film's trying to say at the end of it. It just there's a lot of just weird mixed messages in there.
But this sort of prompts I guess all of Act 2, which is Colin Firth wants Eggsy to be one of the Kingsmen, and each one of the Kingsmen nominate a young person, and they go through trials.
And it's basically Men in Black from this point on, so I quite enjoyed this bit.
Yeah, this is the training bit were okay, and here we get the kind of upper class stereotypes, which are equally fatuous,
True,
and just completely and ridiculous as well. They just sort of take an instant dislike to the guy for no obvious reason,
just like posh people. Don't you see all those Oxford students burning money in front of homeless people, and those young Tory people on message boards going on about how to exterminate working class and people and chavs and stuff? I think it's quite accurate in some regards.
I found it more unrealistic that they all knew to dismantle the shower, put it in the toilet to breathe when they're underwater, and Eggsy didn't.
In one of the trials where the room fills up with water and they have to.
It's not like it's portrayed as if one of them happened to know and sort of shared the wealth.
I think that is kind of generally the idea. He leads them, but I find that a lot more realistic than someone managing to punch through a pane of glass underwater. Which is basically impossible. I don't know what that was supposed to mean.
Yeah. Silly.
I thought he was going to find some little trick. It was the trick was going to be just go to the door and open it, and it
that's
just opens.
That's what I thought when he said. I thought it was going to be the exact same thing from Men in Black. The fantastic scene in Men in Black when they're all trying to fill out the forms and they haven't got anything to write on, and everyone's struggling to write on these forms without a surface, and then Will Smith just gets up and pulls this table excruciatingly across the floor from the other side of the room to write on, and it shows that he's willing to think outside the box and blah 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 blah.
But it's not. But what the message of that should be is sometimes common sense is what you need, and he may not be really well educated in the sort of spy world, but he's got brains. Whereas what actually the message is, and what this kind of carries on throughout the film is, if you can punch it, you'll be all right. As long as you can punch hard enough, you'll win.
Exactly.
That's what the film comes down to.
And again, that's exactly what I'm saying with this film having weird mixed messages that don't quite feel as if it knows what it's trying to say. Because that scene would be so much better if he had just gone and opened the door and that was the end of it, and everyone else had like rigged up some weird thing with the shower. Anyway, we have been introduced at this point to Mark Strong's character with the worst accent I've heard in a long while.
It's very curious, isn't it? And inconsistent.
Touch of Scottish, that's all.
Yeah, a bit Scottish, bit American. I think it's meant to be Scottish, but why did they do that? Because I like Mark Strong, and he would have been... There's no reason why he had to do an accent for the character. It doesn't really add anything.
It's to show the diversity in the Kingsman. The Scot... Like he's Scottish. He's born Scottish, but then like went to university in England, and so he's the accent's slipping as he's got older, but it's still there. That's all.
I mean, maybe it makes him come across a bit warmer and friendlier, and if he did it in his kind of normal way of speaking, he'd just be a bit too menacing.
Possibly, yeah, because he's supposed to be. His character is Merlin, and he's basically the Q of the Kingsman. He's got all the gadgets and computers and figures out what they should do and all that.
And then in that fight in the pub, we've missed the first big kind of fight spectacle, which is something Matthew Vaughn revels in.
Oh, I love that scene.
It really annoyed me that Colin Firth strikes first, because Colin Firth just like throws a glass at the guy's head. That's the first physical attack. So, but he's not Han Solo. The whole point of Colin Firth is that he's a gentleman and a perfect gent, and he wouldn't dare act out of line. So he should wait to be attacked.
No, all those other men were making fun of him and being very ungentlemanly.
They made fun of them. They made fun of him, so he throws a glass at the guy's head.
They just wouldn't leave it alone.
That's not the behaviour of a perfect gentleman.
Sometimes you've got to make a preemptive strike, though. You know, you've got to you can see the situation for what it is. You have to sort it out. Anyway, there's no mention of in the Kingsman that they don't make proactive attacks. In fact, they do all the time. So it seems completely in character.
I love that scene. It's because Eggsy's... I guess stepdad or mum's boyfriend or whatever, and his ruffian mates come to beat him up, and Colin Firth finishes his... Oh no, he doesn't get to finish his pint of Guinness until after the fight, but he's leaving, and then they're very rude to him, and he locks the
Guinness
pub door.
As well.
Yeah, he would drink that.
Would he? It's
he's not going to drink some kind of
shit drink, Guinness. That's a working class drink.
Have you seen the price of Guinness? Foster's is a working class drink, or
that's another load of awful swill. Colin Firth would drink like fancy scotch on the rocks, and
not in a pub like that. No,
and
he
was being a man in a man's pub.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't have drank the kind of scotch you'd get in a pub like that, which would probably be Jameson's at best. I don't know. I really liked that. I really liked that detail. I thought that was actually really nice that he would drink Guinness, because that is the kind of thing where, you know what the quality is. It's probably going to be the same there as it would be in any other pub.
My next note's about the dog. I think it's a nice idea. They have to train a dog, blah, blah, blah. I fucking hate the test with the dog. Now, I don't know if we're getting ahead of the film here, or if I should just go into it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any
sense. That test... the test, as far as I know, it makes just as much sense that you would pass that test by refusing the order and saying, no, I will not shoot an innocent dog. I kept waiting for them to go, you've passed the test. We didn't want you to shoot an innocent dog. Colin Firth even says, when they confront Colin Firth about this later on, when Eggsy says, I'm not going to shoot a bloody dog, he says that the Kingsman will never take an innocent life for no reason. Like, he says something to that effect. It's like, no, the test is to...
He tries to say that as a demonstration of what the test is for. It's like, what? That's exactly the opposite.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense, unless all the dogs are, like, convict dogs that have committed heinous acts and mauled children that we didn't know about before they were given to the Kingsman. So that test, like, it just pissed me off, because it makes no sense on any level. Thematically, it makes no sense. Logically,
Of course
it makes
makes sense. It's like, yeah, it's supposed to show that they're willing to make any kind of sacrifice. Like that, you have a dog, a lovely little puppy that you raise for months, and then you.
It's meant to show that you will follow blind orders for no reason.
Yes, and that you're beyond empathy. That you're not gonna sort of think, oh, I'm gonna. But if they put empathy ahead of logic, and I'm going to do what is right for the mission.
If they'd said that as justification for it, maybe I would have gone with it. But Colin Firth, to justify it, says a load of bullshit about how they'll never take an innocent life, and the Kingsman's this wonderful organisation.
Well, yeah,
and instead,
they have to say that because after all that we've seen, we still have to like the Kingsman as an organisation.
Well, I don't.
We can't believe that people actually died. It's even like in the parachute test. They have this parachute test where they push them all out of a plane and they say, one of you doesn't have a parachute, you need to work it out.
That's the problem.
They do all have parachutes.
Exactly, and that's the problem I have, is that we're meant to still like the Kingsman, but I see through the bullshit of this test, and I don't like them after this. I think it's a ridiculously unfair test, and all it is testing is whether or not they've got an army of brain-dead grunts who will do what they're told, which is presumably any army has that.
Yeah, but the trouble with that is that the training that they've got, that they've had, certainly what we've seen, has not been military training, and it seems like the people they've got aren't from military backgrounds. Like, for example, that scene in Men in Black is very specifically like, oh, here's the top guy from the Navy, here's the top guy from the Marines. Whereas in this, it's just like, oh, here's some posh twat, like, I know his dad. So I've decided to try and recruit him. But why would they have any kind of knowledge that would make them fit for the position?
Well, again, it works if it's a critique of, high society, but...
Yeah, the kind of old boy network of getting you in.
But the film never quite comes down on either side of that, despite kind of making fun of the whole thing. It's yeah. Oh, and also, by the way, if you shot a dog with a blank in the face at point blank, you'd probably kill it anyway. Just for the record. So
you definitely wouldn't like it.
I think you'd certainly blind it if you shot it in the face from a few centimetres away, like he was going to.
I thought it would have been good if like he went to shoot it and it was a blank, and then he thinks it's a misfire, so he just beats it to death with the butt of the gun, just to make sure the job's been done. And like, yes, well done, you're a Kingsman.
I've made a note here. So going back to our Resident Evil episode.
Oh, God.
Well, for those who haven't heard it, I hate with a passion the Resident Evil films. I think they're horrendously badly crafted, badly directed, just tacky in how they're put together. Calvin says they are basically good action direction on show. Good, like that's kind of the cool action. Now, for me, the benchmark of what cool action is and kind of mindless but good action is what you get in Kingsman. That is the level that a film should be hitting if it's going to be mindless action. Because this film has loads of quite inventively choreographed action sequences and fights and stuff. But, I wasn't blown away by it particularly. But, like, for me, this is the benchmark that sort of film should hit, if that's what it's going to be. And...
thing is, with Kingsman, it never goes very big. Like, compared to, say, a Bond film. It obviously hasn't got that budget.
Yeah.
But, so it'll be like, oh, here's a room with some people in, they're going to fight. Or this is going to happen. And it was all very much kind of hand-to-hand combat rather than huge explosions and things like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't small, but it wasn't big either.
There's a lot of long takes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is to make up for the lack of budget, really.
Yeah, to try and see more,
Like, this isn't the kind of film I can imagine have, like, James Bond films and those kind of big action films have huge action units that their sole job is to go and film hours and hours of coverage of cars going at each other and whatnot, whereas this film obviously doesn't have that. And I think you can really tell, especially at the end, in the villain's mountain base, that they're running up and down the same, like, 18 feet of set for about 5 minutes. It's really noticeable. Anyway, in the middle of all this training stuff, we get a lot more of Samuel L. Jackson's character and Colin Firth's investigation. He finds Mark Hamill and his head explodes for reasons unknown at that time. But as the film progresses, it becomes clear that Samuel Jackson is giving out free SIM cards to every person on the planet that can get one. And you can put it in your mobile phone and get free calls, free texts, all this kind of stuff.
He's kind of a Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk kind of character, revolutionary tech guy. Yeah, so the idea is he's trying to give something back to the world, and you get free internet, free calls. Everyone's entitled to one of these SIMs on his network. You don't have to pay any money.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
When Mark Hamill's head blows up, Colin Firth there, he gets sort of showered in some sort of liquid and falls unconscious. And then he's in a coma for what must be weeks, if not months. Why?
Good question.
Both practically in terms of what happened to him in the film, but also structurally in terms of the story that they're trying to tell, the filmmakers are putting together. What was the point of taking him out? Because it doesn't...
Well, I think if you take him out, you can't have him investigating Samuel Jackson anymore. And we need enough time to pass that the dogs are going to grow up and that we can buy that Eggsy and the other recruits have been at this for a while. That's the only reasoning I can really think of. Because if Colin Firth is investigating Samuel Jackson for as long as it takes the dogs to go from puppy to full grown, then he's probably not very good at his job. Because we also get a scene with Samuel Jackson and he has like Swedish royalty over, is it?
Yeah.
He's got like
a Swedish Prime Minister and a Swedish princess.
Yeah. And we get the sense... I like that it's dropped in early on that Iggy Azalea has gone missing, and it's sort of peppered in throughout the film that these famous people are going missing or whatever. And
yeah,
Samuel
that
Jackson
reference will work in 20 years, won't it?
Samuel Jackson is recruiting powerful, rich, famous people to... well, we don't know why just yet. But the Swedish Prime Minister is quite easily won over and the princess is captured. It's around about here that we get probably my favourite scene in the film, which is Colin Firth.
Standout big Matthew Vaughn action scene? Is the one you're...
No,
okay.
It's the scene between Colin Firth and Samuel Jackson when they sit down to dinner and have a classic Bond and the villain discuss over dinner.
I hated this scene.
Oh, fuck off!
It's so on the fucking nose. It's just them going... Oh, have you noticed that we're in a James Bond parody? Oh, actually, yes, I kind of have. So how do you feel about James Bond? Well, actually, I think James Bond's better when it's a bit tongue-in-cheek and silly, because that's what this film is. Oh, yes. Oh, God, it was just the most sub-Tarantino, lazy...
What are you talking about? You love the Scream series. You love that kind of self-referential
series.
Nudging the ribs. We'll be talking about Chucky soon, and there's a lot of that in there, in the later ones.
Yeah, well, the Chucky films aren't amazing as much as I have a soft spot for them. And like, in Scream, they never stop and go, oh God, this is exactly like that scene in Friday the 13th, where it's a bit more like... So in these films, this always happens. So it's a bit more satirical and clever.
This is exactly the same as that. This is exactly the same as them saying in Scream, never say "I'll be right back," never split up, and then they do that.
How?
What?
How is it?
Because they're telling you what the tropes are, and then they're doing it. In Scream, they cite individual horror films. It's like they've got Halloween playing in the first Scream film, and they're saying, "No, Jamie, look behind you," and all that kind of stuff. And
but
at the moment when Jamie Kennedy should be looking behind him, I don't think you could get more meta than that. I think Jamie Kennedy saying, "Jamie, look behind you" in a horror film.
Well, I think the other thing is that Scream from the start is set up as this weird meta comment on the genre, whereas Kingsman isn't. Kingsman tries to be a sincere spy movie, and it's only about...
No, it doesn't. You said it yourself early on. I said
it's all over. Yeah, but it tries to be like a comedy spy movie rather than a weird parody. But then at this point in the film, like halfway through the film, they suddenly go full meta. If Eggsy had been a film student, like, and had been going on about it from the start, like, oh, I know how to do... Like, it's just the fact that it kind of comes out, not out of nowhere, but again, it just added to how tonally inconsistent the film felt. I did like that he served McDonald's.
I don't think... I love that bit as well. He has those, McDonald's under the fancy cloches? Cloche? Them silver things that food goes in. Anyway, no, I love that scene. It's my absolute favourite scene in the film. And my favourite dialogue is when Samuel Jackson talks about how he always wanted to be James Bond, and Colin Firth says he always wanted to be one of the villains, and I think it's really nice. I think you're wrong, Sol. I think you're wrong.
Well, I've got a note here that I hate this, quotes, "This is just like James Bond" dialogue, but I think that's a different scene later on. Is there a point where someone says, "This is just like James Bond"? Because it's after the Freebird sequence in my... Oh, you know what it is? It's after the Freebird sequence when it's Colin Firth's final scene. That's when they say
goes,
it.
"Oh yeah, this is the point where I explain my plan and you escape."
I hated that as well. It's like, give the audience some fucking credit. We know what you're doing. You don't have to spell it out for us as you do it. Oh God.
That's the whole point, though. It's like, I mean, would you need it to be Austin Powers to buy it as anything other than tonally inconsistent?
Austin Powers, now that's a wonderful, wonderful film.
No, it isn't. I mean, it's fine. This is infinitely better.
No, what are you talking about?
As a Bond spoof, this is much better.
Well, maybe. It's more faithful, but as a film, Austin Powers is fucking brilliant.
Shall we get to the big action sequence, which...
yes.
Where Colin Firth's character goes to it's effectively the Westboro Baptist Church, isn't it, in Kentucky?
Here's a problem with that, and perhaps it's deliberate because it's a problem that James Bond has as well. So perhaps this was deliberate by them, but I don't think so. But the fact that, Colin Firth, he needs to go into all sorts of situations, needs to get into the ambassador's party, get him an ID, we can get him into there. Needs to go to this big fancy shindig in Monaco, we can get him into that. Needs to go to this little country church in the Westboro Baptist Church, still just in the posh suit. Looking so amazingly out of place. It's the same with Bond. He'll go undercover, like he can just sort of like sneak in anywhere as long as he's wearing a tuxedo.
Yeah, because they only deploy Bond to play to his strengths, and they've got different double. They've got Congo,
they've got the country bumpkin agent
who's kind of like Crocodile Dundee, and they deploy him to Australia and stuff like that to go into the outback.
Sean Bean, if you need to deploy him into the north.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you two feel about this scene in the Kentucky church? Because this is when we see Samuel Jackson's big villain plan in action, that these SIM cards are going to broadcast a tone that anyone who hears the tone becomes uncontrollably violent.
My main... I was really thrown when I watched it because Freebird starts to play, which anyone familiar with that song knows it's an infamously long song. And then they kind of do all the intro and then just skip to the very end for the action sequence, so it lasts about 3 minutes. And I was thinking, like, why would you use Freebird if you didn't just start the song a bit earlier so the whole thing kind of builds and plays? I've since read online that the original cut of that scene was about 7 minutes long, so I think that was the intention.
Oh, wow.
And I think I've just picked up on the fact that they had to edit it down, which apparently they did, because when the director showed it to Matthew Miller, Mark Miller. Sorry.
Miller.
Yeah. When the director showed it to Mark Miller, he basically said, like, fucking hell, that's a bit violent even for this film. Can we tone it down a bit?
Wow.
I don't think people are going to enjoy that within the tone of the film as it's been established. I think it's going to be a bit jarring. And I'll say that the neutered cut that we got feels tonally out of place, to be honest, within the film. It feels it just feels very mean-spirited all of a sudden, in a way that the film isn't particularly up until that point.
It's like they have to put him in the most dreadful place on earth, which is probably the Westboro Baptist Church. Like, you have to have this preacher at the front being racist, being homophobic, being sexist, being all these dreadful things to justify the level of violence. And I think that annoys me because it's so blatant and
that's the
obvious.
thing. Yeah.
And later on, when you see the general public attacking each other, you just see them sort of scuffling and skirmishing, not like stabbing pens through their throat and stuff like that.
And you can buy
it's just like
Colin Firth's, ridiculously skilled combatsman, but all the people he's fighting against are doing quite a good job of holding their own against him for a little bit. So, it's a bit silly.
What I generally didn't like about the scene is that it's like it's supposed to look really cool. It's like one long take, and then he throws him over here, and then this comes over here. But it all looks so fake, and like you can see all the fake cuts, and you can see like most of the background isn't really there, or someone flies across the camera, and like okay, that was an edit, and it just seems so stitched together, and it's like a Frankenstein of a scene rather than a proper long shot.
I agree.
It just doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel real.
And if
they'd done like
good.
A really cool practical long take with good stuntmen and cool effects, and then like a bit of CGI for the blood or whatever, but that's it would have looked really cool.
I agree.
And it just
it's very I do think the scene's quite cool and well put together, but to say that is the show-stopping number of the film, it's a shame that, like you say, it just ultimately feels quite cheap.
So Colin Firth walks away. He survives the melee, walks out the door, and there's Samuel L. Jackson.
Now, I think this is perhaps the reason why I don't like the scene earlier. I think maybe the scene earlier isn't that bad, and it is just this where they outright say, hey, this is just like James Bond. And now you know what really threw me here? And for the rest of the film, I mean, obviously the big thing is they subvert the James Bond cliche and just kill, instead of, having Samuel L. Jackson explain his plan and allowing Colin Firth to escape, they just shoot him point blank in the head and walk off. But I've seen the trailers for Kingsman 2.
Yeah.
So going into this film, that I was not expecting that. And so for the rest of the film, I kept just waiting for Colin Firth to pop up with an eye patch on as he appears in the trailers for Kingsman 2, which is a South Park joke, I should add. There have been repeated instances of characters being shot in the head only to return at later episodes with like a little bandage or a plaster on their head.
I would like to know if this was a part of the graphic novel or if it's something that they've just done for the film. Because obviously Colin Firth's character is popular, I suppose, with people who've seen the film, and an iconic character in this duology, I guess. But, I mean, in Kingsman, it makes sense to kill him off because you need to have Eggsy complete his hero's journey and have his mentor removed from the picture so he can go in solo.
And that's the thing, the sequel kind of ruined that for me, because they had the balls to leave him dead for the film and kill him off and follow through on the idea of this very, subverting audience expectations thing. And because of the trailers for the sequel, I just never bought it. I was like, right, he's going to pop up at the end, he's going to come back, and that completely would undermine what they're doing. So it kind of ruined that for me, which is a shame. It's a rare instance of a sequel actively harming a film before it, really. Having said that, I'm not opposed to him coming back in the sequel, and the idea of him coming back with just an eye patch looks like the kind of humour that I'd like these films to be running on from start to finish. So,
yeah, I'd like to see how they explain it.
Let's just talk about Samuel Jackson's character at this point, because this is where kind of the full extent of his plan is revealed.
Yes,
in that he's decided he needs to kind of cull the population of humans in order to kind of for the greater good of the planet.
Yes.
Doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, it does make sense.
How?
Well, the idea that overpopulation of humans is
it's a problem. It's a problem. Genuine issue.
Yeah,
and the it's an issue because it might lead to people dying. So
well, yeah, the motivation for him is that the Earth is being damaged, like climate change and all. But the thing is, like, the climate change isn't a problem for the Earth; it's a problem for the things living on the Earth. because the climate will change and other types of life will thrive. So it doesn't quite make sense.
There's easier ways to... I mean, God, if you're going to get these microchips, like, into every... Like, can't you just fry their brains like the other chips can do? Like, couldn't you just fry everyone really quickly? Couldn't you? I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, you wouldn't be able to just put it in the... I mean, the thing with the chips is that it's put in your brain. If you're part of Samuel Jackson's selected group of survivors, which is mainly rich and famous people, then you get it implanted in your head. Whereas the mobile phones are just SIM cards that send out waves.
Yeah, I don't think his plan made much sense, to be honest.
Well, it's like any Bond villain's plan doesn't really make all that much sense.
Well,
most of them.
Well, but I think the kind of concept it works. I quite like the idea of trying to kill most of the world's population. It's kind of a cool motivation. It's the same in that last Da Vinci Code film, Inferno. The bad guy in that was basically trying to cull humanity.
I mean,
it's like Moonraker, the villain.
I think it annoys me because I'm totally on board with trying to lower the world's population because it's a genuine issue that like we're probably going to see the effects of within our lifetime. There's better ways to go about it. You incentivize contraception and things like that. You don't.
He doesn't have the time for that.
Couldn't he just make...
He wants it now. He's impatient. He's very rich, and
couldn't he just make a chip that sterilizes everyone with like radiation or something?
It would take far too long. Saying that, cleaning up after everyone's done killing each other would probably take a while.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to see any remnants of what's happened.
Yeah.
That's what he's got his bunker for.
Yes. Anyway, we get a scene where we find out that Michael Caine is actually in on the whole thing as well.
Oh yes,
for a leader of a master spy organization, you would think he would have done something about that scar behind his ear that obviously indicates that he's had one of the implants put in.
One of my favourite lines in the film is, he offers Eggsy a poison that was set up earlier that's like activated remotely at a time that suits the person that feeds it to the other person. Eggsy does a bit of sleight of hand in a really obviously coming gambit where he swaps the drinks around.
That is a poor moment.
And Michael Caine activates the poison within himself. But then we get the wonderful bit of Michael Caine just going full-blown Cockney. As he says, "You dirty little fucking prick." It's fantastic.
Anyway, we're at the climax of the film now where Eggsy has to get to Samuel Jackson before...
I had another problem here as well. Whereas the character of Eggsy obviously is supposed to be like this working class chavvy kind of guy, and he fits that really well. He plays it really well. The actor's good. Then when he has this big transformation moment where he puts on the bespoke suit, he's been tailored, made to measure, and he comes out and he's the kind of the grand spy. He just looks like a scally in a suit, like he's on his way to court. And he's just like I think you need to be able to play both sides of that character, and he just doesn't do the posh very well. He doesn't do the gentleman very well.
Yeah,
he doesn't look the part.
Well, he never looks comfortable in the get-up, but
he looks like Austin Powers with those glasses.
And that's fine, because that character wouldn't necessarily be comfortable in that get-up, except the film seems to want you to believe that he is at the end of it, and that he's adopted to it, and he's taken to it.
I think he looks very comfortable in it. I think he looks great.
I don't know. It might be the glasses.
I think
the glasses look great.
Anyway, so Samuel L. Jackson triggers the chips, doesn't he? And everyone goes mad, trying to kill everyone around the world. And we see Eggsy's mother, just to give us a little insight into the kind of human, because we can't comprehend carnage on a mass scale. We can only deal with it on a one-on-one basis, apparently.
What? What are you talking? Yeah, obviously they're going to give us some like personal investment for Eggsy. Like, it's not bad enough that the entire world is going to kill each other. Like, yeah, of course they're going to try and make it personal to him, and that his mum is going to kill his young baby toddler sister.
Yeah, I know. Why are you getting upset about it? I'm just explaining. Okay. I'm explaining the mechanics of the screenplay.
You were explaining it with a certain snideness, which I did not care for. To the defence of the screenwriters.
No, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just pointing out how it's been put together.
Okay.
So do you want to know what my issue is with this scene? Because the scene is they phone up the mum and they tell her, put the little girl in the bathroom and lock the door and throw away the key, or throw it under so you can't get to her, keep her away from you to keep her safe. And she is remarkably on board with this and does exactly as they say immediately without needing to be convinced, really. Now,
what's your problem,
Calvin? What do you think my problem is?
Is it that the SIM card isn't affecting the baby?
Yes. Why wasn't the little girl trying to kill the mum from the other side?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That would have been pretty funny.
She should have hacked through the door and done "Here's Johnny," and then got a toothbrush to the eye from the little girl.
I agree. I think that would have been brilliant. So there's a lot of action in this end bit. I would call it good action, apart from the very obvious set limitations.
And the big palace where Samuel L. Jackson's leading the party, that all looks really cool.
Yeah, it does. It's a really nice old school Bond villain lair, and all these rich people. I really wish they'd have gotten some actual famous people cameos in this bit, because the idea is that all these celebrities and politicians and whatnot are congregating around here.
Well, there's an analog for Obama in there. It's obviously not him, but I mean... But I know what you mean. But, it did seem like maybe Iggy Azalea or whatever her name is should have actually turned up at some point.
That's exactly what I thought was going to happen.
Joanna Lumley just wandering around.
I guess it's a hard sell for an actor if it's you're going to cameo and you're playing yourself and basically
but you're just in the background. There's no
after having agreed to this plan to murder everyone.
I'll tell you who do it is
Charlie Sheen.
Anyone who would have been exactly
Tom
Charlie
Arnold.
Sheen, Paris Hilton,
Tom Arnold. Where did you drag him from?
No, but
he cameoed in that Nightmare on Elm Street film.
Is he even
Roseanne?
alive?
Tom Arnold also wasn't he in that Simpsons episode on the spaceship of awful celebrities who is sent into space?
It. Yes. That must be what made me think of him. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, but anyone of that ilk, anyone Paris Hilton, the Situation, Mr. Situation, whatever he's called, Snooki, they'd all be there. They'd all be up for that. I don't think they'd understand that it was making fun of them. They'd be willing to have no dialogue and just in the background for an appearance fee.
Because, of course, Eggsy and his cohort succeed and the signal is switched off and they do some tech whatever to make every chip in every rich person explode. And the explosions aren't blood and guts and bits of bone. It's sort of puffs of fluorescent-coloured smoke. How did you feel about that?
Didn't
very
really
strange
know
departure.
What the thinking was behind
it really goes. It breaks the fourth wall almost. It's very much going, look, okay, we have got left reality. We're being silly now. This is a choreographed scene with fireworks and music and a Busby Berkeley style kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what it hoped to achieve with that. I'm not...
And
it just completely shifts the tone of the whole film.
And it
I agree.
It shifts it in a way that isn't remotely James Bond and doesn't evoke the old James Bond films. It shifts it in a way that's just weird. And it doesn't look great. It looks very fake and artificial and weird. So it's... I wouldn't mind that if the joke was good enough, but it just seems a bit I don't really get it. So I don't really...
I think I would have gone with it had it been an obvious, like, we want it to be a PG-13 movie, we can't show this kind of violence, let's just do it this way. But because they've made a point of showing horrific violence
that's it,
throughout
it's
the film...
It's a very violent film in places.
Yeah.
And both in terms of, showing blood and guts, but also in terms of just how malicious it can be. So, yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, all those, when they're running around the two corridors that they've got and they're being chased by the goons, basically.
Yes.
That is classic Bond, because they were literally got shot at from 3 feet away and never got hit. those guys cannot aim.
Yeah.
But
he's got cool gadgets. He's got like a bulletproof umbrella. And I love the gadgets in this film.
Oh, they can hit the umbrella. They just can't hit him when he takes it down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. But yeah, Eggsy succeeds. The villains are killed.
Yeah, he stabs Samuel L. Jackson, and I wish the vomit thing had played off a bit better, because it is just he gets stabbed through the chest. He looks down, he sees blood, he throws up, he dies, and it should have been something more elaborate. It should have been like he's stood on the edge of like the precipice of a cliff. And he's like about to lose balance. And he's just about to regain balance. And then he looks down, sees the blood, and the vomit like projects him off the edge or something. It should have just. It just felt like it needed to be a little bit more important than it was, because they'd made such a big thing of setting it up. I
think that would have really worked. As it is, I think it's a fine, just running gag.
It was fine. It just felt like a bit of an anticlimax, really. And so then we have a really uncomfortable bit with Eggsy and the princess. I guess we have it before this, but also at the end, where he basically says, like, I'll let you out of this capture, this confinement, in return for sexual favours.
No, he doesn't. He says he wants a kiss.
He says, give me a kiss or I won't let you out.
No, he says, can I have a kiss if I save you? I've always wanted to kiss a princess. And then she says, you can do me up the bum.
Yeah, like, what was that about?
Well, the thing is, the way he goes, oh, well, if I let you out, you're going to give me a kiss. It's supposed to be kind of playful. It just doesn't work.
It just comes across as
and then to kind of try and get away.
Knobhead.
Yeah.
It's like, now is not the time,
It could work, perhaps, if a different character maybe. I think
it would have worked better
on
if
paper
she'd
it probably
said,
seemed okay.
Fuck off, you creepy little shit. And then he'd like gone to let her out. And then she was like, right, well, do you want to do me in the bum then? But even that, like, it just, I don't know. It's just such
Why would that have worked better?
Because he's not as creepy and, I don't know. It wouldn't work.
He's asking for an innocent. He's like being like Super Mario. It's just he just wants to.
Now is not the time to be.
Yeah, it's just really inappropriate timing because she's scared for her life.
Exactly.
She knows that there's a bad guy plotting to destroy the population of the world.
He's abusing a position of power, and
I'm trying. She's offering it to him. She's not like.
Oh no! Yeah, by the end,
she could just accept a kiss. Yeah, fine, do that, and then I'll.
No, but she says, "Let me out," and he goes, "If I get you out of here, will you give me a kiss?" She doesn't know. If she says no, for all she knows, he's going to go, right, well, fuck you then, and walk off. So she's in a position where.
Oh come on! He does it playfully. It's fine.
I think
you're going to read so much into this.
No,
as well.
I mean, I must admit, Calvin, I agree. I think it's supposed to be playful, and it doesn't really work. And it just.
I think it
creepy.
Feels
the fact
very
that then
dated
she then goes,
in a way that might have played in one of the old James Bond films that they're aping, but doesn't play in this day and age, and just comes across a bit unpleasantly, and the fact that she then goes, where she's like,
"Oh, why don't you do me up the butt?"
That's just
and then
puerile.
He does. It was really weird.
It's not,
again,
it's not clever
sort of
or
tonal...
funny. It's not like, well, hey, well done, XZ. Go have your anal sex. It's just really, like I say, infantile. I thought
it's supposed to be, how I take it, is it's supposed to be a play on how these old Bond movies would end, because you would never actually see Bond in the middle of sex with a woman. It's always just him sort of lying with a duvet over him and a woman. He's not on top of her, she's not on top of him, they're just sort of kissing. and it's all quite tame. And this is supposed to be full on. You can do me up the bum. We see the bum. That's how I took it.
Well, how it should have been. It was like he goes to rescue her. He lets her out. She's like, "Oh my god, have you saved the world?" Like, yeah. And then she's like, "Oh, how can we ever repay you?" And he's like, "Oh no, it's just all part of the job." And then she goes, "No, I really want to repay you." And then she sort of like takes that active role and sort of drags him in. And then he kind of like winks to camera as he shuts the door behind them.
She does
that
take
would
an
have been
active
fine.
role.
Yeah,
I know, but
it's
just
it's
weird. And
less-
She still instigates it. I don't understand what the
Plus,
problem
her
is.
active role is to
Because
go,
it's-
forget the kiss, shove it up my arse. That's not a typical thing that women do, actually, Calvin.
What are you talking about? What typical thing
You
that
have
women
to,
do?
you have to
I'm
talk
not
them
saying
into
that
it. You
is.
have to grind them down over
Oh, for
several
God's sake,
weeks.
you're talking about realism at this point in the film. We're just about to see a load of people's heads explode in colourful.
Yeah, well, we
plumes of
didn't
smoke.
like that departure
like that
from
either.
the tonal reality either, as we've established.
I knew you were just going to harp on about this for ages. So I guess we all sort of liked, well, apart from Saul. Well, me and Alan liked it.
I liked it.
Alan liked it a bit. Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So I liked it. I just, in spite of some issues that I have with it.
Anyway, should we get some pictures?
Yes. Can I do mine?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I've been inspired by Calvin's pitch from our Bourne movie episode,
Oh.
which was inspired by Kingsman, JB versus JB.
Versus JB.
Yes. So, Harry Hart is back from the dead, using whatever excuse Kingsman 2 is using. So he reports into Kingsman, he goes into the library and looks around, dials a number on the phone, and he's sent down a pneumatic tube to an even more secret agency below the Kingsman agency, the hallowed halls of H. And
What? The hallowed halls of H.
yes.
From Steps?
No. He didn't look around properly though, did he? Because there's only Eggsy watching, sneaking in behind him. And so Harry Hart, he sits down, he meets with Holly Hunter and Harry Hill. And they brief him on the situation with the president of the organisation, one Herbert Hoover.
Right.
And just then, Eggsy knocks something over, giving away that he's, come down here and he wasn't meant to. And Harry Hill is about to kill him with a sword to the throat, but Harry Hart stops him. No, look, you can't. He's not an HH. Eggsy, sign this. Yeah, and he gives him a thing to sign. He signs it. Now he is. And it turns out that Harry Hart had known that Eggsy was a liability, so he had legally drawn up some documentation to change his name to Harry Hunwin a few months ago, Heggsy to his friends. So they brief Heggsy on the hallowed halls of H, an organisation bankrolled by the combined forces of Howard Hughes and Hugh Hefner to maintain order amongst those with alliterating names beginning with H. And it turns out that two rogue double H's, Heinrich Himmler and H.H. Holmes, are believed to be working together on a new plan to build murder hotels that will be...
Who's H.H. Holmes? I don't know who that is.
He was an infamous serial killer, and he built a big elaborate hotel, and he kept firing the architect halfway through the job, so that he was the only person completely aware of the building's layout. So he had loads of secret passages and things built into it, and essentially it meant that he could go into people's rooms at night without being detected and put them in his little murder dungeons and stuff, and he killed a huge number of people in the process. He's quite an interesting character. Anyway, so yeah, it turns out that two rogue double H's, Heinrich Himmler and H.H. Holmes are believed to be working together on a new plan to build murder hotels that will be deployed once their new army of the alt-right that they're building reaches its peak.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
First of all, H.H. Holmes is a Triple H.
Don't
like
get ahead of the plot.
Oh, right, okay. Okay. It says, I just looked him up on Wikipedia because I didn't know he was. It says his real name is Herman Webster Mudgett. Is that going to be part of the plot as well, or is it just...
No, that's shit, I didn't know he had
Okay. That's a famous name, counts, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a stage name. Now, H.H. Holmes is revealed to be 150% as powerful as the other members of their clan due to the extra H in his name, which makes him a formidable foe. And so Harry Hart and co. need to assemble a crack team of double H's to defeat them. So firstly, they need a gadget man to stock up for the mission, their Q. Hank Hill shows them a selection of propane-powered gadgets and accessories. And then they need to assemble their team, so they need a ghost, someone who can get in and out without being detected, in and out of anything. So we cut
Harry
to
Houdini.
Yes!
Yes, I got one.
We cut to a magic show. There's a man in a straitjacket inside a tank of water, and he disappears below stage. He falls through a trapdoor to Colin Firth and co. stood waiting Harry Houdini. Now next, they need the brains of the operation, a scholar. You could take a stab at this, but I don't think you'll get it.
Helen Hunt.
No.
The brains of the operation.
So Henry Higgins is
Henry
finishing
Higgins.
up performing Why Can't the English, and then he turns the corner and Colin's there. You really care about your country, Henry? We need you. And now we need the muscle. So we're at a cabin holiday home, and John Lithgow's there, chewing the scenery, as always. Now, this is a good one, this. There's a big man stood in the room with a lampshade on his head, pretending to be a lamp. We need all of you, George. I don't know what you're talking about. If you don't all help out, then it isn't Harry and the Hendersons. Fine. And George, his family, and Harry, who was pretending to be a lamp, join the crew.
So Hulk Hogan isn't the muscle then?
No. Okay. Harry and the Hendersons.
That makes so much more sense.
Hegsey asks if they're done in the woods outside. Nearly, Hegsey. And just then, an evil laugh sounds and a horse rides through the darkness towards them. Oh my God. Yeah. It's a decapitated body and it lifts its severed head, Christopher Walken's severed head, and his creepy eyes open wide. Headless Horseman, we need you. So they go to the evil bad guy base where they're confronted with their first boss henchman, Hulk Hogan. So he's on the other team, he's a bad guy.
Yay, he's in there.
Who it turns out...
He's a bad guy?
Yeah, because it turns out they're blackmailing him into doing their bidding with a selection of sex tapes. And they explain in great self-indulgent detail they got them from Spectre in 1963. Now, Hegsey carries on talking. Oh, did you ever see that Bond movie? They say like, oh, that's just like From Russia with Love. And then Hegsey goes, oh yeah, did you ever see that James Bond movie, JB versus JB? It was proper shit. And then they carry on and move on to the next bunch of bad guys. They fight. There's a load of cool action stuff. They beat Himmler and H.H. Holmes. He's built secret passageways into all of the lair, so he proves more elusive. Think we'd go down so easily? He shouts over the intercom. I have a surprise up my sleeve. And he hits a red button and an alarm sounds, and something's being released.
The Hounds of Hell.
No.
Is it?
No. Any other ideas?
Triple H.
The ultimate. The ultimate H weapon, HH weapon.
The H
The
bomb.
Hulk?
Or the Incredible Hulk. So, Horrid Henry springs into battle with a slingshot and stink bombs and a load of other shit that he stole from Dennis the Menace. He proves a formidable foe, grabbing the horseman's head and kicking it off the cliff like a football, causing the horse to ride blinded into the Hendersons family and off the cliff too, taking them all out except for John Lithgow. They see a rocket being launched and split off, this time sending Hegsey to stop it from triggering the hotel murder protocol through its satellite, leaving everyone else to fight more waves of henchmen. Hank Hill, who's now on the plane, he's the only one left to take on Holmes and rushes after him. Eventually, he corners him, but Holmes has a flamethrower, and he shoots it at Hank, but the thing fails to light and fire properly. Gasoline? You need to use propane! And he throws a propane bomb at Holmes and runs for cover, using the techniques he learned playing American football in his youth. And the day is saved, but on the way out of the compound, they run into Iggy Azalea, or whatever she's called, who's been in the plane. You may have won this battle, but the war has just begun, she says, as a helicopter emblazoned with the initials II flies above them, picking her up and carrying her to safety, and that sets up the sequel of HH versus II.
I mean,
I.
I don't want to be. I don't want to completely ruin your plot or anything, but do you know how to spell Iggy Azalea?
No.
Well, Azalea starts with an A.
Oh no! All right. There aren't any other ones with I, are there?
Well, if you know a celebrity with alliterative initials II, please
It's
call
broader
in
than
on 07246.
Celebrity, historical figure, fictional character.
Anything.
I'll take
really
anything.
Classed as a name. I mean, we accepted Headless Horseman, so.
Harry and the Hendersons.
Well, I complained a bit about the lack of good female characters in Kingsman, and this looks to be somewhat rectified in the next one. They've got Julianne Moore and Halle Berry.
Queen's women.
Oh, damn it, yes. Inspired by the recent news that Hollywood is remaking Lord of the Rings, but with an all-female cast.
Expendables, that's quite good, actually. I need to sneak past
that is actually really good.
I think that's what they're calling it, isn't it? They're making a female Expendables. I'm afraid.
Oh, I thought you'd just come up with that off the top of your head.
I'm afraid
okay. That's pretty good.
Anyway, none of this is relevant to my pitch.
Okay,
well, it is kind of, I suppose.
What about Lord of the Flies? Let's talk about that. I think you said Lord of the Rings there, Calvin, but
Did I say Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, you did.
So?
Oh, I meant Lord of the Flies. Sorry, the news that Hollywood are remaking Lord of the Flies, but with an all-female cast. I would like to remake Kingsman, but with an all-women cast.
Oh, you're going to get a lot of flack for that.
Yeah.
Because number one, not my Ghostbusters, all right? Number two, Kingsman is an inherently masculine critique about men.
Let's not judge too soon. Let's see how he's going to address it. Presumably taking on the years of female matriarchy that has been.
So Spermsy is is a shabby little girl.
Basically, I want to do it exactly the same, except at the end, it's Swedish Prince that tells the woman that she can do him with a strap on, and that's it.
Do you use the term pegging, or is that too niche?
No, you can do that.
We have to. I think that's we we have to address other issues in the film that would change if you were making them into women.
Nah, that's the only one. So, Alan, what's your pitch for a Kingsman sequel?
Okay. If we're doing this as a direct sequel to Kingsman, so what actually happens at the end of Kingsman They trigger the electrical bomb thing, whatever it is, in everyone's heads, and so kill.
Bitch day afternoon.
Yeah, and then
What? It's a female dog.
Yeah, we got it. So Merlin triggers all the implants. So all these people die, and we know this is a huge proportion of like the leaders of the world and important people that are just taken out just like that. Boom. So obviously that's going to have like an impact on the world, and so that's what the sequel will be dealing with, because like the economy would collapse and there'd be civil unrest everywhere because like leaders and royal families have been torn apart and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to set up my villain first of all, okay? So, from all this unrest, an unlikely leader starts to sort of crop up. There's a man named Zachariah, who is from an Amish background, and he sees the recent events as a message from God, warning against the dangers of globalization and modern technology, of course, because, that's what it was all about. Now, I haven't done a lot of research into the Amish, so I'm really just basing this on pop culture references of Amish. But I think that's okay because they won't see it. Because obviously they're not allowed to watch it. And even if they do hear about it, they'll just turn the other cheek anyway. So I don't think we need to worry about that. So so Zachariah here, he's just like a small community leader. But for whatever reason, in this sort of post-unrest world, he starts to get this mainstream attention. And everyone's searching for something new, a new way of life, and he manages to provide it. So he's got this Amish-influenced ideas of a kind of small community living that starts to attract a lot of people, and it eventually sort of starts spiraling out of control, blah, blah, blah. And eventually gets a lust for power, and so that's when he sort of starts to turn evil. And now as a kind of Bond villain type thing, he can have a cool henchman, and so instead of having the legs that are blades, because he's Amish, so his Amish henchman can be like, he's just got like, instead of an arm, he's got like a huge wooden club or something that he just sort of like smacks people with. Okay, so that's the villain. We'll sort of intersperse all this story, setting that up, but then also have to deal with the Kingsmen and their rebuilding. So in that first film, we see that Merlin takes charge and takes Lancelot and Eggsy to deal with the bad guy. It doesn't take any other Kingsmen, so I think we have to assume that they were all killed because they were in with Arthur and they'd been turned, and so they were killed at some point, or at least they couldn't be trusted, whatever. So it's basically just the three of them now, and they have to rebuild the whole thing. They decide to rebuild it, but because these two agencies they're young people, they're much more liberal minded than their kind of old fashioned forebears, and so they want to bring the Kingsmen into the 21st century. So first thing they do, they rebrand themselves as the King's People, and instead of using the Knights of the Round Table as their code names, they want to take their names from a source that represents a much more utopian idea, Star Trek. So Merlin becomes Spock, Eggsy is Chekhov, and then they suggest Lancelot should be Uhura, but she doesn't. She thinks it's sexist if they insist she's the female character.
Can they get given tribbles
as
part of their training?
Oh yeah, they have to raise a tribble from. So she thinks it's sexist to suggest that she would have to be the female code name, and anyway it'd be whitewashing, so she can't be Uhura. So instead she becomes Sulu. Okay, so the rest of the film is just
still whitewashing. Is that a joke?
It doesn't make sense. That's the. I mean, it's a philosophy that we're sort of half sticking to. It's fine. So then they have to find all their other recruits and things to fill up the team. Most importantly, of course, they have to find a Kirk. And so what they do is that Merlin Spock, he finds this guy who used to be an agent and then retired. And they go, oh yeah, he's very good. We're going to bring him back into the fold. He can be our new leader, and he will be played by Daniel Craig in a kind of fuck you, Bond kind of role. he's finally just sick of it, so he's going to start taking the piss out of it. Anyway, so yeah, blah blah blah, plot. They end up, you know, they end up having to have this big confrontation with this guy who is preaching ideas of communism and non-individualism, and we can't have that. So the big twist, though, as they approach for the big final battle, when they get there, Zachariah, the villain, he's set up this kind of electromagnetic distortion field that means their electronic equipment doesn't work. And so that's the kind of nice little gimmicky twist for the end. It has to be like a non-technological fight, and that throws them into chaos. They have to kind of relearn everything they know and come up with a new plan. And the new plan is basically punch everything. The good old fashioned way. They'll just plow through everything with their fists. And so then you can have a big showdown where Kirk and Chekhov they fight a load of Amish people. So like all the goons are just Amish people. That'd be funny. If they can incorporate Amish type things,
I would love
like
that.
Buggies,
like pitchforks and
butter churns or something. I don't know. Yeah, and so there, that's it. They fight them. Eventually, they get to Zachariah. The final villain. They manage to stop him by making him examine the actions he's taken, and he realizes that he's been taken over by pride, which is a terrible sin for the Amish. And so ashamed, he decides to submit himself to God's will for punishment. He decides he's going to jump off a building, and if God wants him to survive and approves of what he's doing, he'll find some way to save him. And of course, he just smashes into the ground. And I think that'd be a nice point for him to turn into like a giant firework that goes off with a synchronized musical score. For something. And then, of course, when that happens, all his followers see this as an act of God, as it completely defies all known earthly laws. And that convinces them to continue fighting. And so then they have to murder them all. The end. The ending is the massacring of all Amish people.
Well, that was good fun. Good spirited discussion, followed by interesting takes on sequels. Classic diminishing returns. Shall we stop it there?
Let's just get out while we still can.
Thanks for listening to Diminishing Returns, and please do check out our website, dimreturns.com, for more reviews, hints of upcoming episodes, and our combined Top 100 Movies list. You might be very surprised with what is currently at number 1. Also, please subscribe to us on iTunes if you haven't already, and leave us a positive review if you can spare the time, so that more people like yourself can find and enjoy the show. Thanks again for listening, and remember, podcasts maketh man.